What's going on, everyone? Welcome to a Tuesday edition of Back Your Play with Q. As always, I'm your host, Rich Quinones. Check us out on the YouTube channel, on social media, X and IG at Rich Q and Q. Keep the engagement, the subs, and the comments coming. A lot of football coverage to get into on this Tuesday from our good friends over at Play It Again Sports. Our good friend, our NFL insider, the host, Lloyd Vance's Insider Football 1029 The Game. And of course, Broad Street South, Lloyd Vance, kind enough to join us. And Lloyd, all I have to say to you is another W in the books for the New York Football Giants. How are you, my friend?
I'm doing good. I was thinking you the whole time. That helmet over your shoulder, that's the unis they wore, man. That was the
Starting to be.
old.
I'm starting to, I dusted it off. Starting to come
That's
to
the
the
old Phil
forefront.
Sims and Jim Burt and all them guys, man.
Old school.
LT, man, and they played with some desire out there. Q, they could have easily folded after that late
Yes.
turnover. The Packers take the lead by 1 point, and you're like, okay, great game. They got DeVito out on their RPO plays, and
Yep.
that really spurred the team. But they wanted to win. And now the Giants are 5-8. I'm not saying it's 2007 all over again where
No.
they were 9-7 and they were getting to dance and make some noise. But this is a good end of season story, and it shows that Daboll and Tommy, no one's quitting in the National Football League.
And so, first of all, obviously, Giants get the 24-22 win over Green Bay. They're now 5-8. They've won 3 straight. Tommy DeVito, the quarterback, has led the charge. And you're right. This is why we go back to a couple of weeks ago, and I mentioned there's no tanking in the NFL. There's no tanking in football. But you look at that game last night, and I felt, the Packers score first, but the Giants come right back, and they showed a little adversity, right? Then the defense started to get into the mix here and there, albeit they missed a field goal. I thought it was going to come back and hurt them, but they kept defensively. They rattled Love a little bit. They got the special teams blunder. They had the Packers down on the goal line, and it was a real heads-up play, Thibodeau and the gang, and they forced a fumble. They got the bad pick. They were able to turn that into points. And even the officiating again was just horrible. I mean, the fact that they, were overturning that Packers touchdown late, I was like, what are you doing? It's a touchdown. Even Aikman was getting tired of some of the nonsense and Buck. But what impressed me the most is the quarterback. I mean, we joke and we call him Tommy Cutlets and this and that, but Tommy DeVito, the numbers last night, you can appreciate this. 17-21, a $158. 71 yards on the ground with his legs, 7 carries, a touchdown throwing. The 3 big throws he made last night. He made the play on the flea flicker where Robinson came back and made an adjustment. I love this kid Robinson coming off the torn ACL. The play where he rolls out to his right, I'm sorry, man, that is an NFL friggin' throw to Hodges. I mean, he zipped that ball in there.
Huge. And
then down the last drive, where they broke it down on ESPN, bad matchup. Linebacker had to drip back. Robinson slid over, and he hits him for 30-something yards. It sets up Bullock's game-winning field goal. Giants win 24-22. The conversation is going to be, the kid DeVito and, Tommy Cutlets and this and that. I have fun with it. The passing Paisano, the sling and Sicilian. My buddy came up with a new one too, Tommy Tiramisu, which I like, which is a wonderful Italian dessert. But be that as it may, the kid is showing he can play. And I'm wondering, I don't believe he is better than Daniel Jones. I don't. I think people are piling on Jones because he got hurt when he made a $160 and he was inconsistent early on and he got hurt, but they forgot about last year. But I will say this. I can relate. I think a lot of people relate to this kid because he's a grinder. He's a scrapper. I think there's more juice. There's more electricity. Like sometimes you feed off your teammates, right? You feed off your workers, your coworkers. You feed off in different environments. Jones was like Eli, stoic. Eli had the ice water in his veins, but this kid is the rah, 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 the sign and the symbol and just fiery and feisty. And it's resonating with the team. They might not win another game. They might lose to the Saints. They might turn around and lose to the Rams. They might get waxed twice by the Philadelphia Eagles. But he has shown that he deserves to be in the NFL. Now, whether that's going to be a starter, I think the kid can be a real viable backup for a long time. And I'm not being disrespectful. I'm not trying to take away from what he's done. I've seen quarterbacks come and go and have flashes, right? It's great what he's doing. Can you do it against the Eagles on the road? I don't know, but I'm enjoying it and it's relatable. And the kid hasn't turned the football over. He's shown that he's tough, he's smart, and they're rallying around this kid. And right now they're a game out in the wild card. As preposterous as it sounds, the Giants are one game out of the wild card in the NFC.
Yeah, Q, he's galvanized his team. And that's what you're talking about. It's the backup quarterback effect. And is he going to be Jeff Hostetler or Nick Foles? I mean, those are most improbable stories everywhere. Backups come in and led the team all the way to the playoffs and the ultimate goal, winning the Super Bowl. But I think he's a guy that has given his team a jump. We've seen this a lot over the years. Think of like Fitzmagic, the Ryan Fitzpatrick, a guy like there that comes in, has a lot of moxie, the everyman, and the thing is with Tommy DeVito, he looks like a Jersey guy, you know what I
Yeah.
mean? We all know these guys growing up, guys that went to college with
Yep.
buddies of mine,
Absolutely.
and he's relatable, and the fans like him,
That's
and you
it.
could see, and you
100%.
can
That's
see
a great point that you bring up. He is relatable. Daniel Jones
he
is more
really is.
stoic. Duke, this kid is like the kid you're walking and you get in a bar fight and all of a sudden he jumps to get your back. That's, you know what I'm saying? Like that's the kind of guy you want
Yeah.
in the foxhole.
Oh yeah, he's one of your boys. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like
Yeah.
he's a guy, and you can see the guys rallying around. They like him. Saquon Barkley, a guy who we've killed over, a lot this season in terms of, is he playing with guts? He's going out there playing hard, he's running out the Wildcat. And I think that Dable's like, you know what? Let's just go with this. Let's have some fun with it. The season everybody thought was lost. They had some really bad losses early in the season, and kind of a laughing stock. And everybody's like, "Oh, they're going to be in the basement in the NFC East." But they rallied around him. He's, as I said, he's relatable, and they've opened up that playbook. They're bringing back some of the stuff they did last year with Daniel Jones. Those RPO plays where he really showed me a lot. The one where he got out on the edge,
The
and
wheels.
I think it was a DB that came up on him, and he put his shoulder in him and buried the guy,
Yeah.
and he jumps up, and the teammates just love that, and I a guy I covered here in Philadelphia reminds me a lot of Jeff Garcia when he came in for the Philadelphia Eagles that one year. He really turned that team around. And I'm not saying they didn't love Donovan, but they seemed to actually love Jeff Garcia more. And he just played with so much guts. He willed that team forward.
But when does it stop becoming like a cute little story and the camera pans to the agent and the family? And I have always believed even the worst quarterbacks in the NFL, you had to be really good to make it this far. And you almost have to wonder why they didn't let this kid throw the football against the Jets. Maybe it was the conditions, but I'll tell you what, Taylor doesn't have the gaff against Buffalo. Now, instead of 5-8, you're talking about a 7-6 team and a lot more juice. But be that as it may, is it now? Are we past kind of it's a cute story? Like I need a larger sampling size. And like I said, I'm all in on this kid. I think it's a great story. Local kid, Jersey guy playing for his home team, his favorite team, the Giants, and going out there and just slinging it and having fun. But you also have to be realistic because Cinderella has a way of, the clock hits 12 very early sometimes in the NFL, in the world of sports. He can go out against the Saints and, like I said, have that 18 of 29 for a $111 and 4 interceptions. But it's his job going forward for the rest of the season. Is it still a cute little story, or hey, as crazy as it sounds, is I don't think he's a long-term solution for the Giants as a starting quarterback. I just don't believe he has the same skill set as Daniel Jones. But I've also seen Trent Green go down and Kurt Warner come out of nowhere. So I'm kind of like, I'm torn a little bit with that, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I'm covering that whole Nick Foles thing. It's lightning in a bottle, and you never know who that guy is going to be. But I
But we
would tend
saw
to
it with
think,
Foles, though, not to cut you off. We saw it with Foles
yeah,
early before he had 7 touchdowns,
right. And
right?
then he kind of went away.
Yeah,
Yeah, he
yeah,
did have the 7 touchdown
yeah.
game against the Raiders, and everybody's like, "Wow, this guy can sling it." But he, I'm talking about like Act Two when he came back to
Fair
Philadelphia. I know
point.
he had like 3 acts in Philadelphia, but I would tend to think that Tommy DeVito, look, this is a nice story for now. It's the backup effect, and they're just going to go with it. Now, looking at the Giants' schedule down the stretch, um, at New Orleans,
Yep.
winnable game, at Philadelphia, the Rams, Philadelphia. So, it's going to be proven. It's going to be okay, let's see what he can do. But obviously, Q, always follow the money, like we always say. They gave Daniel Jones what, a $40 million per season contract, and he's their guy. But you never know. There may be if DeVito plays well, you never know. There could be some fun in training camp where it's like, okay, the kid's healthy. Daniel Jones is still kind of feeling his way, and there's a little controversy.
Well, yeah, I don't know so much controversy, but I'll say this. There are teams around in the NFL. Look, Indianapolis, I think Minshew is going to be a free agent. Richardson has already shown he's injury prone. Carolina, they might have buyer's remorse with Young. Hell, the team they're playing on Sunday. You don't think the Saints maybe are going to watch this kid play? I mean, look, it's been a disaster with their quarterback, especially Carr. Atlanta, their quarterback stinks. So this kid, it's to me, his mindset is it's not cute anymore. Like, the other stuff, it's all smoke and mirrors and fluff, but he's going out there showing you he can make plays. All I'm saying is let's not stick him in Canton just yet, because, and I'm not being negative, I'm not trying to be a cynic. We've seen this before. We've seen listen, for a New York guy like myself, it's insanity.
Yeah, I was going to
Right?
say the same
It's
thing. Yeah, sure.
insanity. Someone said to me the other day, well, this is like Victor Cruz. No, Victor Cruz got hurt, had the big preseason game, got hurt, preseason game against the Jets, got hurt, missed an entire season, came back, dropped a third down pass right in the breadbasket against Washington, and Coughlin sat him. That same season, he went on the run and it was embraced. So you go from the salsa dance with Victor to this with Tommy Cutler. It's like it's these embraceable stories because they're relatable. The guy that comes out of nowhere. But I would just kind of caution. I don't believe he's a better quarterback than Daniel Jones, and I've been the biggest Daniel Jones cynic and critic. But there's something to be said. Like the ticker does not show up on the scouting report, right? The heart doesn't show up
You
until,
just got to live in it now, Q. You know what I
yeah,
mean?
yeah.
Enjoy it week to week.
Hey, man.
I know all the Giants fans that I know. They're loving it, and it's brought back this season because it was
Yeah,
getting so ugly
yeah,
early in the season, and this is one of the NFL's most proud franchises. We know it's one of the cornerstone franchises. The Giants, and
yeah.
it's good to see them to have some fight because I just thought for sure the Packers were winning that game, given that they were on a win streak coming into the game.
You do not believe in the power of the pasta penne. So how about the other game last night? My goodness. I mean, Miami, what the hell are you doing? You're up 14 against Tennessee. That is a horrible, horrible loss. Like my buddy is texting me, Tua's reverting back to a little goldfish. Like that was every time I saw the screen, he's tripping, he's stumbling, he's fumbling. It's almost as though if Hill's not out on the field, he's like beyond a pedestrian quarterback. But give Tennessee credit. That was a hell of a comeback. That's a bad loss by the Dolphins last night.
And that is because too they were going to be the number one seed,
Yep.
walking in the door. And you're right. Hill gets a little banged up. Take him out the game. Somebody else has got to step up. I know Mostert had some touchdowns in this game. Chen, they were trying to work the ball into him, but Tua has got to lead his team. And all along they've said we want our respect. They said everybody keeps saying we're only beating teams that are bad. Well, you know what? You kind of showed yourself in not protecting this lead
Yeah.
and finishing the job. So Miami, little fraudulent if they were going to be the number one seed. So it's going to be interesting now, Q. The Ravens have that number one seed, and we'll see if they're able to hold it. Miami has the Jets next, Dallas, which is a prove-it game for them, at Baltimore, and then Buffalo. So they have three prove-it games down the stretch, and Tua's got to play a lot better.
And their defense had bad gaps last night. That's a 27-13 game. But Tennessee responds. Levis had a big game, obviously, that late drive. They score, and then Miami gets the ball back. And I think they went 3 and out. No, they converted one. They had a 2nd and 7, then it went to 3rd and 6. Then there was they called timeout. No, they went 3 and out. They gave the ball right back. Tennessee scored, and then they get the ball back with a chance to kick the game-winning field goal, and you've got the 4th and 2. I don't know what the hell kind of play was that. And then the pocket collapses, Tua gets sacked, and that's pretty much it. Tua, Hurts, there's a couple quarterbacks that have played themselves out of the MVP race, but I'm pulling up his numbers, man. I mean, he didn't throw for a touchdown. He got sacked 5 times. And they ran for $158. And you
very
still lose.
You can't say Q was right with you. I said with his numbers and everything, he's got to be in that conversation. But he took a step back last night, and Tennessee, let's face it, they're a team that had they're 4-8 for a reason, and that was a bad loss, as you were saying. That was a must-win situation for them because remember, there's only one bye going into the playoffs.
We mentioned some teams, like, let's just say down the road for Tommy DeVito. You look at Tampa, and I thought, and I like Baker Mayfield. Again, relatable guy, tough as they come, a gamer, right? And you watch that game on Sunday against Atlanta. I mean, Atlanta's so bad. They could not put away Tampa Bay. They couldn't do it. And then, boom, you get Baker with the big play, I think with 30-something odd seconds left. The kid Otten hauls it in, and quietly now Tampa Bay's 6 of 7, and Baker's numbers aren't going to blow you away. But again, I think he got sacked one time, Lloyd, but more importantly, he didn't turn the football over.
He did. He was good Baker. We always say he's either going to show up and lead the team or he's going to sink them. And he totally he had a lot of moxie in his game, Q. He was 14-29, 144. That's not going to jump off the stat sheet, but he had the 2 touchdowns, no interceptions, and much like DeVito, he started running the football in key moments when he had to. He had that 1 rushing touchdown, and the story of the game, though, to me, Q, is the Falcons at home. They got to win that game, and you're right that Desmond Ridder, he's just a guy. He's always putting the ball in harm's way, and I don't think they really trust him. Arthur Smith doesn't trust his quarterback down there. They kind of work around him, and they have a lot of weapons, but it's going to be interesting to see who can win that very bad NFC South. All these teams right now are 6 and 7.
Yeah, and you'd have to think too. They go and they get the kid Robinson. And then prior to that, they drafted Kyle Pitts, who was supposed to be this beast. And he's been, aside from, his rookie year, you almost think he's not playing in the league anymore. He finally was able to get in the end zone. I think he's had 2 touchdowns, 44 receptions, close to 600 yards, but it's well off the mark of 1,000 yards a couple of years ago. And I'm also wondering if maybe that's because of who's throwing him the football. But that's a team I don't trust. Another team that I hate to do it, man. I might start to waver and waffle here, but the Detroit Lions are making me look like a jerk off. I mean, let's be honest. How do you lose that game? That was the game where if you were a legit contending team against a bad team, you take care of Chicago. And just as I saw Sirianni make some uncharacteristic 4th down calls, I saw the same thing with Campbell. It was almost like panic mode in that game. Sloppy football all around, and the Bears blast the Lions 28-13. So, how much cause for concern right now if you're a Lions fan? And, just like we talk about the Philadelphia Eagles, are they going to be able to turn this around come playoff time?
Yeah, the story of the Lions may be that they rebounded and finally made the playoffs. But Q, I just don't see this team going very far because that defense, the Aaron Glenn's defense, has always been leaking oil all season, and teams have been able to move the football. And this is a bad spot for them. They're coming from playing indoors, and now they're playing in a tough environment in Soldier Field. It was kind of nasty and mucky out there, the weather. And Justin Fields was able to get to the edge and make some plays in this game, particularly with his legs. He ran 12 times for 58 yards and 1 TD, and they couldn't stop them. And then you talk about Detroit. Bad Jared Goff showed up. He had two bad interceptions in this game. Was not driving the football down the field. Amon-Ra St. Brown was not making the big plays that we've seen all season, and Laporta, the tight end. So, when I look at this Detroit team, I think it's going to be a nice story for them. And this is a building year, but in terms of being in the Super Bowl, I just don't see it. So they're at Minnesota, at Dallas. That's going to tell us a lot.
Yep.
And then they have Minnesota again. So those last three games are going to be huge for them.
Yeah, I still listen. They're a playoff team, but I thought last night maybe that was an opportunity for Green Bay to kind of,
Yeah, they didn't seize the day either.
Yep, chip away a little bit. Cincinnati gets the big win against Indianapolis. I mean, look, they're doing it with a backup. They put up 34. The kid's playing really well. Those two teams are going to be fighting for a wild card spot, Indianapolis and Cincinnati, respectively.
Yeah, that's a huge win for them in terms of standings because, as you said, they got this glut of teams in AFC that are 7-6, along with the Steelers and Denver Broncos and a couple other teams. So, good win for them. And you wonder, is Jake Browning getting that backup jump that we talked about with Tommy DeVito? I think eventually he's going to come back down to earth as well. He had a couple throws where you're like, whoa, don't put that ball there. And then he got away with it. So they got Higgins back. They got obviously Jamar Chase and Mixon. So they'll lean on them. And the Bengals have a good roster. So, if the kid can take care of the football, they can probably jump into that mix for that number 7 spot.
You watch the Browns and we kind of laughed and I chuckled the other day. I was like, watch Cleveland give Joe Flacco a $100 million contract. But you know what's interesting? I'm watching Flacco play, and you know what this reminds me of? You can appreciate this.
Hey, I was going to give you a name.
Go ahead.
I think it reminds me of Vinny Testaverde at the end of his career, kind of for the Jets. That remember that one year where he came back and he was like, man, he's doing it.
Yeah, they went to the title game and then he tore his ACL. Yeah. But I actually throw you another one because it was kind of like well-traveled a little bit. This reminds me of Boomer Esiason, because you remember Boomer Esiason, all those years with Cincinnati, couple years with the Jets. He went to Arizona, okay, and he had a couple big games, but then he came back to Cincinnati. I pulled it up. Those games that he played that year, I vividly remember the game against, and I have to pull it up, it was a crazy game they lost against the Eagles. I believe he threw for 500 yards in that game. It was like 44-42. He went absolutely bonkers in the game. 378, I'm sorry. And then the next game, I think it was like 400 and something odd yards. He had the back-to-back in 85, that was. But I'm saying basically later on in his career, kids are old enough to realize what he's doing. I'm trying to draw the parallel. This kind of reminds me of Flacco. Like, you never question his arm strength, right? But it's funny. Think about what he's doing at 36, 37, 38 years of age. And I guarantee you they're in sports talk radio in Cleveland, they're probably thinking to themselves, we might be able to milk this guy for one more year after the fact, right? I mean, and you gave all that guaranteed money to Deshaun Watson.
It's crazy, Q, because I covered him. He was on the Eagles, in the one preseason, and they let him go to the Jets. But when watching him, it's like, I don't know how much he's got left. You know what I mean? And he kind of was like, yeah, I'm done. But he comes off the couch. And he always had a howitzer of an arm. He always had a great arm. He was putting the ball in harm's way before when he was with the Jets and the Eagles. But he was in total control against the Jags. He outplayed Trevor Lawrence in this one. He was 26-45, 311, 3 TDs, only 1 interception. And Cleveland's a team, if they can keep Cooper healthy, they have weapons and they could make some noise. And let's not forget that the AFC North is kind of downtrodden. So I think they've already beaten Baltimore this season. So they're a team that can easily slip into that. They're 8-5. They can slip into that 5-6, the 7th spot. I think they're even fine there. But this is a great story. Another one, improbable season. And you always love to see these older guys do that. And they all think, I love that commercial cue where it shows like Dan Marino and them, and they're all sitting
Oh,
around.
suit up
Maybe I
one
can
more
get out
time.
there one more time. You
Yeah.
know what I mean?
Well, you know what's
And
funny? You and I, when we covered that draft, that was the year they started to put everything in advance on the screen in New York.
right,
And
right.
and we saw Flacco sitting there, and we're like, what? I remember I interviewed him when he got drafted, and I asked a question to him, hey, there was really concern with you coming out of Delaware with your footwork. And he's like, yeah, I don't care about that. Like, he always had that, South Jersey Audubon guy, went to Pitt, transferred to Delaware, put up some big numbers, won a Super Bowl with Baltimore years back. But yeah, to your point, it's just sometimes, man, you need a different leader under center, and teams kind of respond differently. But more importantly, they're 8-5, and Jacksonville, Lawrence is kind of banged up. You're starting to look at Jacksonville now. You're starting to leak a little bit of oil. The AFC picture, it's absolutely crazy how it's shaping up. Because then it kind of leads me to what happened with the Texans. I mean, that is so jet-like for the Jets to go out, put up 30 points in bad weather. And as we kind of have the conversation with the, Daniel Joneses and the DeVitos of the world, you look at Zach Wilson. And I mentioned you last week, I don't care if he throws for 500 yards every game to close out the season. He's not the answer going forward. So what does the kid do? He throws for 300, plays a pretty clean game, and the Jets put up 30, and they beat the Texans 30-6. It's like this tease. It's almost like I want to go all in, but then you have a moment where I have reservations and I'm afraid to go all in. And I think that's the battle that the Jet fan and probably Joe Douglas, Salah, the Jet organization is having with right now, because they're like, where the hell was this from this kid?
It's crazy because it was one of those moments you're like, wow, this is what it was supposed to be. But I feel like he's the old girlfriend. You know what I mean? Like a lot of guys like, I'm done with her, and then he brings her back, and then it's all good for a couple weeks, and then boom, it
Yep.
all blow up once again. So he had a good week this week. Salah, obviously a guy who's fighting for his job as well. He said he's the starter the rest of the season, and they're going to Miami. So this is really going to show us, okay, is it him or is it Tua? Who's going to step up here? Washington, then they're at Cleveland. That's going to be fun to see him against Joe Flacco. And then at Patriots. And you know
Yeah.
how Belichick loves to play against a young quarterback. So, this is his opportunity to show, okay, I still have can be a starting quarterback to the NFL. But I think, it was a 1 week kind of thing, Q. And unfortunately, the biggest story was Stroud, man. He got hit and then he bounced his head off turf. That reminded me a lot of Tua last year. And you could see he was very disheveled. Hopefully they won't rush him through a concussion protocol.
And you could have made a case it was a dirty hit. I mean, you really could have. But you're right. I mean, they want him under center. Ravens get the win in overtime on the punt return. That loss by the Rams helps the Giants. You get the Vikings and the Raiders. We were praising Antonio Pierce. Well, what happened to that, right? I mean, he's not going to be the head coach going forward. They're going to need a quarterback. They might rip it and tear it down again. Their offense stinks. And then you have the games I kind of want to focus on too a little bit. San Francisco just continues to go about their business. And I still maintain, we talked a lot about the Eagles in Dallas the other day, but I still maintain that the most complete and the most explosive team when healthy are the 49ers. When you look at the wide receivers, the tight end, the quarterback, the line, and the running back position, they put up 28. Yeah, it was a little dicey here and there against Seattle, but I kind of knew, no Geno Smith. Locke was going to be out there, threw a couple bad picks. San Fran right now at 10-3. And then you look at the Eagles, then you look at the Dallas Cowboys. We can talk about scheduling and how it plays out as the season progresses. But as much as I look at San Francisco and I look at and you tell me if I'm off, I look at their remaining schedule. Arizona, Baltimore, Washington, the Rams, I can see them running the table. I can see them running the table. That's how well they're playing. And what have they won? 5 in a row, 6 in a row? I think 5 straight. Purdy has been outstanding. Presence in the pocket. I can see them going 14-3 and solidifying home field advantage.
Yeah, and they're not afraid, even if they did have to go on a road, they could
100%.
easily take care of business in the playoffs. And they're a very dangerous team, and they're a physical team, Q. And you saw that's the way they just dominated the Eagles, running behind Trent Williams and Kittle on that left side. And McCaffrey is seeing the holes, and he could take it to the house at any time. And then you talk about all the weaponry, Ayuk and Debo Samuel. They're starting to get him being a Swiss Army knife kind of guy, running the ball and also catching it all over the place. So their team, when they're on schedule, they're extremely dangerous, and they got it right from the jump. That first play of the game, McCaffrey gets to the outside, and then he's breaking the daylight for a 70-yard some yard run, and they stopped him at the one, but then they punch it right in. And then defensively, that's where I've always watched this team. They have guys at every level of that defense, particularly Warner and the rest of those guys that are just game changers. So, I agree with you. I could see them running to table. They look like the definitive number one seed. If this was college football, to be number one in the rankings, and the road's going to go through San Francisco. And if they can get that bye, that's really going to help their team, because when Debo's healthy and when Trent Williams is healthy, they have not lost a game this season. I think they're 9-0 or 10-0.
Yeah, speaking of when healthy, this is a major, again, you just talk about all these quarterbacks, well, Jefferson, the wide receiver, again goes down, but how about Justin Herbert? Man, I'll tell you, if you look at the major quarterbacks, Aaron Rodgers Achilles, Kirk Cousins Achilles, Herbert finger, Joe Burrow wrist, Deshaun Watson shoulder, Daniel Jones knee, Anthony Richardson shoulder, and a litany of other guys that have been banged up here and there. I mean, what do we chalk this up to? Just one of those fluke years where these quarterbacks are dropping like flies, which, by the way, I think it opens up for more parity in the league too.
Yeah, it's just one of those years, Q, where these guys can't stay healthy. I don't want them to see the NFL overreact like they always do and put some more legislation in that,
Yeah.
you can't take a quarterback to the ground and all this fun stuff. Like, come on, let the guys play. This is some of these are non-contact injuries,
Yeah.
like Aaron Rodgers. He wasn't really even hit, and it was just his time to get hurt. You actually have to say, okay, now we got to enjoy some of these backups out there, see what they can do. And then these coaches got to do a good job in terms of getting these guys going. And let's not forget that the rosters are 53 players. They have talent all over the place. They got to get some other guys contributing, whether it's the receivers or the running backs, and they all got to do their part.
But the NFL wants these guys out there, obviously, from a marketing standpoint, just for the quality of play. I mean, it drops off exponentially with some of these journeymen and some of these backup quarterbacks out there. I don't know how Staley survives that in Los Angeles. I think his comments earlier in the season, talking about the defensive scheme and calling the plays, that act is kind of wearing thin. It's been a brutal year. They have so much talent. Like you start to look at Justin Herbert and say, you're going to have that Phillip Rivers / Dan Fouts career. You're going to put up monster numbers. You might go to the playoffs here and there. You're probably going to peak at a potential championship like both those quarterbacks did respectively. I mean, Fouts had to go in the old Riverfront Stadium in 82 under horrible conditions. I still think he deals with frostbite in that game that they lost. That's as far as, the peak of their careers. And I just look at Herbert, I'm like, man, he's such a talented quarterback, but he's stuck right now with a bad franchise that has no idea what the hell they're doing.
Yeah, true. And Staley's going to be one of the first coaches to go on that Monday. Obviously, this team, they lost so many close games, and he cannot make the adjustments. Defense was his calling card, and they lost lead after lead in the fourth quarter, and he's just pushing all the wrong buttons. So I think they're going to try to get somebody in there. Kellen Moore is there. I think maybe they'll talk to him, but they're going to interview a variety of guys. Maybe they'll get that new young genius, but it's going to be offensive-minded coach. Now, the crazy thing is, Q, I'm hearing rumors that maybe they would go after Belichick if he leaves New England, and they would give him the keys to the kingdom. He could kind of come in there, be the GM because Tom Telesco was there as the general manager, and he'd probably go with Staley because that was his hand-picked guy, and he also had Lynn that he picked
Yeah.
before that kind of failed. So maybe they bring Belichick in there, and then he gets McDaniels. They bring the band back together, but there's definitely change coming for the LA Chargers.
Tuesday edition of BYP. Rich Quinones here. Lloyd Vance, kind enough to join us, host of Lloyd Vance's Insider Football 1029 The Game, part of the Broad Street South Network. Hear him every Monday at 8 o'clock. Does a great job breaking down all the games. All right, you've got Kansas City and Buffalo, and I was joking the other night. If you're Kansas City, you cannot complain about officiating at all. I mean, Kadarius Toney, there's a reason the Giants jettisoned this clown. That's on him, man. And Andy Reid can sit and say what he says, but the player, if you think you're offside and you're lining up, you check with the officials. You check with the line judge. Everyone knows that.
Every time, too.
Yeah, he looked like he was in the parking lot. That's how far down the field he was. What was a north end of the end zone? But the main thing is Buffalo still has a heartbeat, and Kansas City is, man, they are leaking oil. I can't believe when I heard the stat that Patrick Mahomes, and I'm thinking to myself, wait a second, is that even accurate? Patrick Mahomes has never had to go on the road for a playoff game
Correct.
before. Listen,
And
yeah, 9-5, man. I mean, what is wrong with Kansas City right now?
Yeah, Q, and they're 8-5, and it's a situation where they've always Andy Reid and Mahomes have always lived on. Okay, the road goes through Arrowhead, we get the bye, and
Yeah,
we only got to play 2 games, and we're good. But this team's a total mess, and that meltdown that Mahomes had at the end of the game, he looked like a petulant child yelling at the officials, and you know who he's mad at. He's really mad at his receivers. Rice had a very bad fumble. Tony had his mistake with lining up all sides. There were several more drops. I think they have over 30 drops this season to lead the National Football League. And always in key moments, Kelsey is not the guy that he used to be. So he's not getting open, and these younger guys are not stepping up. So Mahomes is so frustrated. Their offensive line is kind of it's a new patchwork job there because they lost both their tackles. Orlando Brown is doing a nice job with the Bengals now, so they have 2 new tackles in there, one of which Donovan Smith. We've seen him struggles from when he was at Tampa Bay, and it's just Brett Veach, the general manager there, Andy Reid, they did not do a good job enough stocking that offense for them. It's much like I was talking about the Eagles, and they knew they had a problem at linebacker and safety, and they didn't really fix it. The Chiefs have never really fixed their receiver position, and it's just rearing its head over and over again.
They don't have a late lapse against the Jets, lose that one in overtime, lost a close one to a bad New England team. And then you look at the Eagles game. Now you're talking they're 7-6. They're a 10-3 squad, right? And all is right in Buffalo. I think that win the other night saved McDermott. I mean, you win a game like that. They've got Dallas now that they're going to be tested. But think about these games. The Chargers with no Herbert, New England with their quarterback debacle. Who the hell knows who's going to be under center, whether it's going to be Zappy Dappy Doo or Mac Jones. And then Miami might have already locked up their seeding because they're not getting home field. It's going to be Baltimore. Buffalo, we were getting ready to read the last rites. Now all of a sudden we're starting to see that, the heart monitor start pump a little more, and they still have a couple breaths left.
Well, they rallied around their coach. Obviously everybody was like, "Oh man," what he said in meetings. And then they had a closed door meeting as a team to kind of close ranks and pull together, and that's what they did. And they knew this was their season on the line. Josh Allen was willing his team to victory. He looked like that MVP candidate that we've always talked about. 23 of 42, 233. He had 1 TD. But he ran the ball key moments when he had to, showed a lot of toughness, getting out of sacks, rolling away from pressure. And then they even got a little bit of running game hook in the rest of that crew. So, they're a team you want to see in a dance queue. So hopefully they can keep this thing going. But, there is a log jam. I got my playoff, if the playoffs start now, rankings. And right now they'd be number 11. So they're behind Pittsburgh, who we know Pittsburgh's number 6, which is crazy. I
Mhm.
think they're going to fall out of that.
Agree.
Indianapolis at 7-6, they're 7th seed. Houston is at 8, 7-6. Denver 7-6 is 9. Cincinnati 7-6, and then Buffalo 7-6 is 11th spot. So there's going to be a lot of movement in these last 4 weeks, but you want to see Buffalo in there because they are they're a little older in certain spots, but you want to see them compete. And Josh Allen is one of those elite quarterbacks out there.
All right. Game ball. Was it a quarterback?
Nah, I stayed away from the quarterbacks this week.
All right. Who do you got?
I'm going. This is representative of the whole team, but I gave it to Cowboys cornerback Stephon Gilmore.
I didn't
He had
even.
9 solo tackles. He had a forced fumble, and he was just he was very sticky in that game, just dominant in terms of competing with the Eagles. And it just showed you Dallas was ready for that game, and they turned it up a notch, and they kind of left the Eagles behind. So gave it to him.
Lackey always is a bad loss. I don't think you gave it to Tua. I'm gonna say you gave it to Tua.
No, I did not.
Okay, I'm gonna say wasn't the Eagles because you have to have Christmas dinner with the family. Um,
I should have gave it to Sirianni. I didn't
Lions,
know.
Stafford.
You had the right team, but you picked the old quarterback. It was golf. It definitely was
Oh
golf.
my God! Yeah, what the hell am I
Yeah,
thinking? Yeah,
it
Jared
was
Goff. I'm sorry.
Jared Goff was terrible in this game too. He was 20 of 35, 161, 1 touchdown, 2 interceptions. He was sacked 4 times, and his average per attempt was only 4.6. So he could not drive the football down the field. And they're showing that they're built for a dome. It's crazy because they're a Midwest team and everything, but they just did not look prepared to go out there and face the elements and the Bears team that was scrappy and to put up, what we talked about before. Remember, there's no tanking in the NFL.
Yeah.
All these downtrodden teams are ready to fight, and we should have some good games down the stretch.
How about this breaking news? Al Michaels is out of NBC's NFL playoff coverage.
He's been complaining way too much, and he another one of those guys,
So
and he's missed some things too.
they've got 4 playoff games next month. So you have the network's number 1 team, Sunday Night Football's Tirico and Collingsworth are going to handle 3 of them. One's going to be exclusive to just the network streaming service, Peacock. NBC has 2 games on the first weekend of the playoffs, and they had their number 1 college football team, number 1 college team, Noah Eagle, Todd Blackledge, obviously Noah Eagle, good young broadcaster, son of Hall of Famer, the great, the Birdman, Ian Eagle. Noah and Blackledge, along with sideline reporter Catherine Tappan, will be on the call. So, I mean, that's crazy when you think about it, because Michael's swap out by NBC has pretty much been in the works. I think it also goes back. There's been some reports of, even going back to last year, Tony Dungy, the perceived lack of enthusiasm, right? I mean, I'm not going to sit here and say it's a young man's game because I still think he has his fastball. Maybe he's lost a little bit on the fastball, but I think we get so fixated. Like when I watch these games, I do watch and listen for the broadcast. It's just what I do. I do it all the time. I do it especially now, doing more basketball games, doing a lot more boxing. I really get myself locked in with how it sounds. But I think that's a pretty big, apparently he was taken by surprise of this. I also think a lot of it has to do with, you have these bad games on Thursday night and you're disinterested. But then last night, conversely, can I give credit for a minute to Troy Aikman? Because not a lot of broadcasters are going to have the guts and the balls to basically call out the refs. I mean, last night he's like, what are we doing? It takes you and I 5 seconds to know what the hell the call is, right? I mean, I'm sure someone probably phoned him late last night, early this morning while he's getting up, working out, having his cup of coffee. They're like, hey, you need to ease up. But he's only saying what the rest of us see. And we're waiting for a prominent play-by-play guy, a prominent analyst to say what we all see and feel. Like, enough is enough. Okay, the touchdown that was called back, and then the Saquon Barkley play, who, by the way, he gave up on the play. He should have got back up and tried to make the tackle. You look at that play, and I'm thinking to myself, well, wait, did he get touched? Did he trip? Why is this taking so long? The refereeing and the officiating in the NFL has taken way too long to decide when to throw a call. They called pass interference last night on Green Bay. There was no PI. It was a horrible call early on in the game. But kudos to Aikman for actually having the onions and the stones to call out the refs.
Yeah, and what he's doing now is bringing something to the game, Q, and that's what you want from your broadcaster. I've always like a guy like Gus Johnson. Some people say he's too excitable on this that, but Al Michaels seemed at this point in his career he's kind of punching the clock. He's going doing the game. He's like, all right, 3 hours later, all right, this is the result. We're good.
Yeah.
So maybe give some of these younger guys an opportunity and I did like that Aikman stepped forward because I was saying the same thing. I know watching like the Kansas City Buffalo game, it was brutal. There were like two or three situations where they stopped the game and they're reviewing this over and over again. I think it was a fumble near the sidelines was one of them, and you're like,
Yep.
okay, enough already. Let's figure out where to spot the ball. Let's play some football here.
Yeah.
You know, hopefully the refs will get it together, but they got it. They got to talk this all season about maybe an eye in the sky or something because they're missing too much stuff, and then they're throwing phantom flags, as you said, where they shouldn't be, and then there's other ones you're like it's egregious, and they're not even throwing it at all.
Yeah, well said. Lloyd Vance with the last word. Don't forget to follow him on X at Lloyd Vance. Kind enough to always join us during the week on Q. And of course, BYP will break down the games later on the week. You can catch him every Monday, 8 o'clock Eastern Time, 1029 The Game, Broad Street South. Host of Lloyd Vance's Insider Football, and always with some strong opinions, even though when he rips on the Eagles, it makes for awkward moments come the holidays with the family. Always appreciate you jumping on, my friend.
All right, Q, thanks for having me on.